And so that's kind of where I'm going to start. And so for those, if this was your first time joining us, if you did not come to the first session, again, I'll just introduce myself. Ano ai kako. Nice to meet you and greet you. My name is Miki Tomita, and I'm calling in today from Wailuku at my parents' house. I live in Palolo on the island of Oahu, but I am here for the day, actually for the day and night. And so I'm just really happy to share space with folks that are primarily from Maui, which is where born and raised in Pukalani, and then moved down to Wailuku when I was in middle school, and have always called this place home. And so I'm happy to be here with you. And I'll go ahead and I'm gonna start the presentation. And the first session was really about me sharing Uncle Pono Shim's practices and what he learned and was inspired by Aunty Pilahi Paki to share with the world. And this next session is about sort of the personal practices and applications of that. So I'll begin with sharing about Uncle Pono a little bit, and then we'll move into the practices. Let me go ahead and share my screen, make sure that I got the right thing going on. And then at any point in time, you guys have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. You can also just, I'm a pretty informal workshop host, I guess. So if you want to just unmute and ask a question, it's totally good. And I just ask that we be mindful of the time, because I also need help watching the time. Okay, so this is our second session of the Buildings of Foundations of Aloha. And we think about this as a daily practice to build healthy foundations for our best self, work, and community. And this entire framework of Aloha is built upon what is shared by Aunty Pilahi Paki. So we often see this poster or a representation of it, particularly at the Maui airport. That seems to be the one most people take a picture of and send to me. And they're like, I saw the poster. This one was created from the mana'o of Uncle Ramsey Tom and Uncle Pono Shim. We're still, there's a debate about who the originator of the poster itself is, and we're still tracking that down. I just recently launched a nonprofit in Uncle Pono's legacy after he passed in April. And so we're looking to just help find the authorship of that, and perhaps commission them to create a different poster that shares Uncle Pono's teachings as well. So we're in the journey. If you happen to know who created this poster, I have narrowed it down to two sources, but they are very different. And so I don't yet know which one it is. One is a monastery and the other one is a restaurant in Oregon. So it's two totally different things. I don't know. We'll see. Anybody might come out the winner on that one. So we'll just figure it out. But we also have permission from the family, and of course from Uncle Pono, to create a poster of our own. And so we'll work on that too. So we bring up these teachings of Aloha that Aunty Pilahi shared with the world during the kind of the rise of the Hawaiian cultural renaissance in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And she shared with the world these deeper meanings of aloha, that aloha, not necessarily an acronym, although that is what it looks like, it is functioning that way. But she was one that very deeply believed in the universe of meaning that is contained in every sound. That there is a spiritual component to every utterance that meets your breath and your vocal cords. And so in aloha, you might find at least these 5 values to begin with. Akahai, lokahi, olu, olu, ha'aha, and ahonui. There are other practitioners that have looked at aloha in different ways, aloha, and other kind of like ways of thinking about that container of meaning in each universe. But this is one, and this is the one that has become popularized. The key in this is that in aloha, so even though these 5 might be representations of aloha, really part of this poster says that it's a person cannot do one without doing all. And if you're not doing one of them, then you're not doing any, right? So if in your practice of aloha, you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm doing it right? If you are akahai, not you are being akahai or doing akahai. If you are akahai, if you are the representation of akahai, then you are aloha, and you are practicing all 5. If, however, you're like, oh, today, like I did pretty good at ahonui and ha'aha'a, but I didn't really have any of my olu practice or didn't really find lokahi practice, then you probably weren't living in aloha. Just, just part of that understanding of like, if you do one, you do all. If you don't do any, then you're not doing any at all. If you don't do one of them. So that's kind of it comes all together as a braid, and I'll go through what that braid might look like as a visualization. Another thing that's shared, Uncle Pono and Uncle Ramsey, many practitioners of Aloha bring up the Queen's quote. It is affectionately referred to as the Queen's quote. There are many Queen's quotes, but this one from Queen Liliuokalani talks about to gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. That is Aloha. All things in this world are two, in heaven there is but one. And I will, we'll talk a little bit more about that quote in this presentation as well, because this is only part of the quote. It is, the quote is usually fractured into 3 or 4 different pieces. And when you stitch them all back together and braid them, you see aloha in all forms. And so it's really interesting to look at all parts of that quote together, which we'll do. And then the other thing that I bring in is the prophecy. Uncle Pono calls this Aunty Pilahi's prophecy, that when Aunty Pilahi spoke to the world, she prophesied that the world would turn to Hawaii as they search for world peace, because Hawaii has the key, and that key is aloha. And we talk a lot about what keys do. It's not the answer, right? It is the key. And keys, they don't function well without locks and doors. They have to have something, right, to be put into action for. And it also requires somebody to do something with it. So aloha becomes part of this action, but by itself, it is not the thing that is going to be able to bring world peace. It takes the people to turn the key, to lock the doors on things that we do not want to bring with us, and to open the doors to things that we do. And so it's a very active sort of way of in thinking about aloha as the key. And so I share that, Anakala Pono Shim, he passed in April of this year. And part of the commitment that I have to him is to continue to share his teachings, as he shared with many of us in this room. So I know that many of you have had the pleasure of meeting him in person and being a student. And I often meet people who have been his student for much longer than I, and I know I have lots to learn. But I am on this journey with him as his kako'o through his departure from this realm into the next. And so I continue to share what he taught to us as students, and also what he and I worked on together as kako'o and teacher, as kumu. And so one of the things that he shares with us is that he received his knowledge of aloha and his practice, his assignments, really his homework, from Aunty Pilahi Paki directly on the beach in Waimanalo in 1976 as a 13-year-old. She was his grand aunt. He is a descendant, a lineal descendant of Pilahi, and he used to spend time with her. And so on this day, when she took him for this walk after a particularly tense meeting that she moderated between Hawaiian community members, she told him, I want you to learn how to think Hawaiian, not necessarily to speak Hawaiian, right? I want you to know Hawaiian thought. Because if you think Hawaiian, regardless of the language you use, it will be the language of aloha. And aloha is the language which reveals the connection to all people. So we think deeply about that, about aloha connects. It does not divide. And so we can speak our aloha through any language that we choose, including the unspoken ones. And so I think about that deeply, of how just the way we walk in the world, the way we engage with the things around us is our language of aloha. It is our way of communicating. And that people, and seen and unseen, living and more than living, right? We are receiving messages of aloha all the time. We just have to be open to it. So that is Uncle Pono, who I bring in today into this space. And part of what he shares is what, and there's videos that are linked in this deck, which I'll share with you in a bit, is that Aunty Pilahi taught to her students and conveyed in her writings that there are 3 interpretations, or 3 ways of thinking about Hawaiian words. That there is the ho'opukaku, or the literal, and then there's the kauna, or symbolic. And we understand kauna to be that which is embedded in song, in poetry, the saying something but meaning something a little bit different, more artistic, metaphorical. And then there is the noahuna, or the spiritual. And that's a little more elusive for people, because it requires you to think about the universe as I guess, as a language, from the beginning of time that's been speaking through all of us. And so it is a spiritual journey, and it's a little bit harder, I think, for us to to hear that level and to feel that level of resonance, especially in the busyness and the noisiness of the world that we live in today. There's a lot competing for our attention. And so just today, for this 35, 40 minutes, we'll try to really think about what that practice looks like for us, and see if we can understand symbolic, the kauna, and also maybe unpack some of what was meant in the noahuna, that was passed on. And so coming back to the Queen's quote. So the entire Queen's quote, as far as I have been taught, by Uncle Pono and two other teachers, that this is all one quote, that comes from one source. And it is, I could not turn back the time for the political change, but there is still time to save our heritage. You must remember never to cease to act because you fear you may fail. The way to lose any earthly kingdom is to be inflexible, intolerant, and prejudicial. Another way is to be too flexible, tolerant of too many wrongs, and without judgment at all. It is a razor's edge. It is the width of a blade of peely grass. To gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. That is aloha. All things in this world are two. In heaven there is but one. And so that version of the Queen's quote, when we think about that, and I'll go back a slide. When Uncle Pono talks, actually, maybe, do I have the other one? I don't. When Uncle Pono talks about olu olu, and he talks about gentle strength, gentle enough to carry a baby and strong enough not to drop it, I think of that as that balance, or that this demarcation between the way to lose any earthly kingdom is to be inflexible, intolerant, or prejudicial. But another sure way to lose it is to be too flexible, too tolerant, and without judgment, right? So somewhere in between, and both of those are extremes, and somewhere in there is the balance, right? And that balance is not the same for all of us, because our skill sets, our disposition, we are all going to fall somewhere in that range. And the olu olu practice is to know, and the akahai practice, like the aloha practice, is to know ourselves and our strength, but also what the situation commands, what it needs from us. And so we rise to meet that challenge. And then the other one is like, it's to gain the kingdom of heaven is to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, to know the unknowable. That's ha'a, right? Going underneath the words to understand everything that is being said in all of the unspoken ways. And all things in this world are two. In heaven there is but one. That is lokahi. That is knowing that there are no sides. There's just one being. And then we are all perspectives in that. There's one actual universe. And we all have our own universe that we're the center of. And we think the reason we have differences of opinion and views is because someone, is colliding with us in that. But actually, it's because we are different. We are the center of our own universe. We have to be. They are the center of their own universe. They have to be. And what Lokahi tells us is that those are all interpretations of the one known universe. We are all a part of, and we share. And so it's trying to challenge us to come to an understanding of, like, I wonder why you are thinking of that way. What is it that shaped your eyes in that way? What has shaped your ears in that way? What is it that the words that come out of my mouth that are shaped by my universe, they don't land on your ears the way that I think they might, right? Like, that's all shaped by our individual experiences. And I think that's where some of the humility and patience and ahunui, like, that all comes in. So those are sort of all practices of, like, unpacking that aloha response that Uncle Pono would always say, like, what is the aloha response? What is your aloha response? Right? The minute you feel that tension coming up, the minute you feel that, like, pain of something, we can choose the aloha response. And the aloha response is not always to be the most gentle, not always to be the nicest. I always tell people, my good friend Keone, he told me, I will always be kind. I will not always be nice. And that I sat with that for a long time. I was like, yeah, you're kind of a jerky pants. You're right. Like you're not nice. But if you can get past the like not niceness of his comments, you realize like he has the best interest and the also the most insight. His words though, yeah, it's hard, really hard to hear sometimes, but like his intention and what he's trying to say is so kind, right? Like you shouldn't talk about it this way, or how come you're doing it this way? Or it sounds like criticism, but I recognize that what he's doing is he has my ultimate intention and goal in mind. What he's saying is you're not going to get where you want to go with the words that you're using, right? The way it comes out is, how come you say I'm that way? But I understand that his words don't match what's in his heart or why I think so. So the niceness, and then if somebody's nice but not kind to you, I wouldn't want that either, right? When they're like, oh yeah, that's perfect, that looks good, but inside they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're gonna say that or use that or you did that, right? But the nice part is like they're like, yeah, it looks great. That's not kind, right? We don't want the sugar coating part of it. We really, I mean, maybe sometimes we do actually. Maybe the kindest thing somebody can do to us at points is not criticize us and just let us learn on our own. But I think those are all parts of the journey. So I share with you that Queen's quote just to kind of get us started in like what this aloha practice and application might be. The next thing, so this whole session is the beginning part. I'm just bringing in some quotes and some things from other aloha practitioners and kupuna, different islands of knowledge that I have learned, which I also, you know, Uncle Pono in this case was someone that learned with me because some of these were not readings or people that he had studied with. And so I was happy to be on that collaborative learning journey with him for 2 years. But this excerpt comes from Tales of the Night Rainbow, which is an oral history of Kaili'ohe Kame'ekua, who is from Molokai. And she tells, this is her story as compiled by her mo'opuna, Polly J. Lee and Coco Willis. So in this, she shares about the bowl of light, which some of us also associate with Halemakua and his teachings, and he comes up in the next slide too. But in this one, I love this one because it really is aloha for yourself. Each child born has at birth a bowl of perfect light, which is a gift from our aumakua or our higher self. In this case, they really think aumakua is you are the descendant of your aumakua, your higher self in a previous form. If he tends his light, it will grow in strength and he can do all things. So we're born with this light, perfect bowl of light. And if we tend it, swim with the sharks, fly with the birds, know and understand all things, do all things, right? If, however, he becomes envious or jealous, he drops a stone into his bowl of light and some of the light goes out. Light and the stone cannot hold the same space. So every time we have those negative thoughts, those things, you know, it's a stone drop. You can feel it in our stomach. You can feel it dropping, right? That like weight comes in. So if he continues to put stones in bowl of light, the light will go out and he will become a stone. A stone does not grow, nor does it move. If at any time he tires of being a stone, this is the tricky part because I was like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? If at any time he tires of being a stone, all he needs to do is turn the bowl upside down, the stones will fall away and the light will grow once more. You're like, oh, how easy. Just dump it all out, right? Perfect. Start again. I think the process of our life is trying to figure out like the working through our trauma and our past experiences and our discomfort levels in the world is the act of emptying out the bowl. I think maybe it takes a large part of the lifetime or intention, but it's possible. And so I think we are working to empty our bowl of stones and to grow back our bowl of light, right? I also think that in some of the communities and situations that we work in, we didn't put the stones in our bowls. Society put those stones in our bowls. Every time we walked into a classroom and we were told we weren't smart enough, or we went for a job interview and we were told we weren't a good fit, or any of those things. Anytime we walked into a store and somebody gave us some dirty look, like that's a stone in your bowl of light. And that wasn't from you. But according to the mana'o of Kaili'ohe Kame'emekua, we can empty that bowl. And I think it's hard because it's heavy. How do you flip that bowl over, right? How do you get the strength to do it? And I think that's the aloha. Like we have to aloha ourselves and it builds our strength to be able to empty that bowl of stones and build back our bowl of light. And again, this sounds easy. And yet I look at some of the youth that I work with in the most challenging situations. I'm like, I have no idea how to help you turn over your bowl, but I'm here. I can put my hands on it with you. We can try, right? And I think for me anyway, what I tell other adults that work with the same youth and the same, and even the youth of most privileged places, I hate that I throw them out all the time. That's a really bad habit of mine, is to say, oh, you already got plenty. You don't need me. But they also need the kids from our prestigious private schools. I mean, they're also in suicide watch and doing all those things. Like they're conflicted. And so I think everybody needs somebody to help them flip over that bowl and regrow the light. But it's not just a one-time deal. That's the other thing, is how can we build the network of folks that can be with you every time your bowl needs tipping over, right? And so that, I think, is the fabric of family care, of community care, of care for the person. So I'll move on to the next time. I'm like all crying now, and I'm not even sure what the presentation was supposed to be on, but I'll go to the next slide and we'll figure it out. Okay. Oh, halimakua. All right. So speaking of bowls, dance, flipping. So this is beautiful Halekelo Halani Makua, who is a kupuna, revered kahuna from Hawaii Island. He was in an automobile accident in the 90s. And so therefore, so his teachings, a lot of it is conveyed through the words of one of his students. Contentious. There are some debates about whether or not Halimakua shared with him all of these things, but this is one of the Bowl of Light is a book that does share a lot about Halimakua, and we can learn about it. There are also other sources. He did a lot of original writing for the United Nations Indigenous Forum as well. But in this one, so we see the very what Halimakua, sort of the short version of what he shared is this 3 lines that's above his picture there. Love all that you see with humility, live all that you feel with reverence, and know all that you possess with discipline. And that was his aloha practice, right? Love all that you see with humility, live all that you feel with reverence, know all that you possess with discipline. So there's that balance, right? There's always like a strong and a gentle side to everything that comes of these teachings. What I love about this one, the universe is always in balance. We're the ones who are out of balance. So if we think about it that way, like everything is going the way it's supposed to, I guess, but it's like us that are all wonky, and then we make everybody else around us wonky, and then we just have like generations of wonkiness. So when we think about, we are the ones who are out of balance. Yet the paradox is that to establish and experience balance here on this level, it always begins with us. To establish the balance, this harmony within yourself, you have to be in love. And when you are in love, you can offer yourself that love as well. This energy, this tapestry of aloha, is the most powerful of all forces in the universe. And only when you are in a state of aloha, only then can you truly touch the universe. Only when you are a state of love and practicing kindness, only then will the universe respond. So Halimakua, in this particular conversation, this is being in love with yourself, being in love with your community, being in love with all the things that make you up, that make up all the components of yourself. This is aloha for yourself and others, right? Like he wasn't speaking about romantic love. This is like cosmic, like I was born to be this kind of love, the ultimate like self-determination. And so that is sort of like, once we can establish that in ourselves, always starts with us and then grows itself out. We cannot look for it outside and external. It has to start with us inside. And again, that's like easier said than done, right? So I sit with these teachings and think like, how do we teach this to a 3-year-old? How do we make this every single day until you have it so ingrained in yourself that like, I am deserving and earning of love from all sides in all ways through every generation, right? Like that I can contribute love and healing and kindness and balance to the world, not just take, also not just give, right? Like there's all of these things I think that are embedded in these messages, and they're not easy lessons. I for sure I have not really unpacked so many of them. But when we come to our work and we come to the things that define us, I want to share with you a little bit of Uncle Pono in this session. Again, working with the universe that is contained in each sound. when we think about the poetry and the symbolism and the spirituality in the language, Uncle Pono does a little bit. This is a short clip from a video that you have access to through the deck. And I'll share it with you right now. Let me make sure that I am sharing my sound, because sometimes I don't do that, and that's terrible. Okay, I am. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and watch part of this video, and then we'll kind of move on to practice.
One of my favorite books, and is very precious to me because it was given to me from Nanaviri, is Change We Must, which could be considered Jediism. The Hawaiian said, Hinane ka olelo. The language is a riddle, rich in metaphor. The Hawaiian language was melodious and graceful like the people. Before the missionaries came and converted the language into the written word, the Hawaiians used figures of speech in a language that was like poetry. This use of the language vanished long ago. Hawaiians today speak the missionary language, a literal type of Hawaiian. The riddle is gone. When Captain Cook came to Hawaii, imagine the brilliance, innovation, the self-reliance, incredible amounts of food. Now they saw our effort, they saw our production, and they saw our effort as what? Work. They heard our word for work as hana. So they interpreted hana as work, because they saw our effort as work. And it's not. What is work? Work is something that you do until you can find somebody else to replace you. That's not hana. Hana is hana and work is work, and they are not the same thing. Ha-na. Hana. Ha-na. As we ha, we na. As we express our ha, as we share our ha, as we go to a moment of emptiness, we na. And what is na? Comes from that word noa. Noa means to unleash, to set free, to unbridle, to liberate. Akahai. Kindness, grace. What is grace? Grace is you leave something better than you found it. So, na is unleashing grace. Leaving something better than you found it. Like what? Like the land. Like people. Like the rocks, like the trees, like the animals, the birds, the ocean. That didn't work. So as we ha, we na, as we express, we unleash grace.
There's no time restriction in the word hana, because you're doing it from your heart, from your core, from the last breath you get, and focusing on that particular situation.
So similarly,
one of my favorite books, and
sorry about that. Similarly to how I have a difficult time using aloha as a casual greeting, I also now, when people say like, oh, let's pauhana, I'm like, I think that might mean you're dead, right? Like that you have released all of your divine inspiration and grace, and you have done the thing that was your calling in life. And so I'm not sure when that will be for me, but it's probably not happening at 5 o'clock every day. So, just thinking about like what in that interpretation, and again, this is just from being with Uncle Pono and thinking about what all these words mean, that we na our ha, right? We release our divine spirit, our divine breath. We reunite with that which was what we were destined to do. We find our calling and we answer it. And that's hana. Right? And so E'ohana is the bringing together of all the people, all of the entities that are living their divine grace together as one. In which case, we don't all have the same job. We don't all have the same thing that we're doing. We don't all have the same talents. We don't all have the same views, but we're doing it together as a braid, as part of the tapestry of existence. And so I'm going to bring in one more video. I know it's a lot of videos. Sorry, folks. But I love this one and I can't say it. I'm actually, there's a lot of Molokai today in this. So I'm going to bring in one more from Kumujan Kaimikawa. I think I have the video linked here, but we'll see. So we're going to watch a little bit about the braiding of the aha. And I just want you to think about and consider as he's talking about it, because he's going to talk about expertise in the community and how that braids together. But I think about every individual fiber is braided into a cord, right? And the cord is then braided into cordage. And if you think about akahai, lokahi, olu, olu, ha'aha, and aho nui, the 5 aloha practices in Aunty Pilahi's approach or framework, that's part of a braid, right? And we braid those into our strength for self, strength for family, strength for community. And that's our ability to aloha the world, right? So those are sort of like, you are both a cord and a cordage. You are part of everything that is connected around you. And so we think about the quality of that connection. But we'll hear right now, we can bring in Kumujan's voice to share with us about this, the beautiful cordage that is the aha.
The Aha Council on Molokai were called Aha Kiole. In order to understand the significance of that word Aha, it means council, but it also means a type of woven cord. And the ancients chose this symbol of the Aha because it preserves and teaches all of us the pono way and function of the Aha councils anciently. Now, when the ancient Hawaiians take the bark of the olona and they prepare it and they weave it into a single cord, that single cord is called an aho. And then they take the single aho and they join it with other aho and they begin to weave a cord. And that cord that is woven of many aho is called an aha. Now this is extremely significant in the mana'o of our kupuna. Each of the aho that are used within the aha cord represent each expert that sits on the council. An expert of fishing, and his expertise is like a single strand of aho. A healer is like a single strand of aho. One familiar with the land is a single strand of aho. One familiar with water preservation, with forest preservation, with architecture, with astronomy. All of these people, all of these experts are aho. And you take the experts, each one, and you bring them into an aha. You weave their expertise together. And their weaving of the expertise together has one purpose: to serve the people, to help to preserve the lands, to help to preserve those things that would help to sustain life for the community.
So one of the things that I think about in that video, which is so beautiful, is that each of the strands has a purpose. Each of the strands is chosen for a specific reason, and it's to build strength for the cord. It's not for the existence of the strand. And then when they get woven together, they actually become, it's synergistic, right? They're stronger than they are individually. And then when you take the cord and you braid that into the cordage, like that's even more of a reinforcement of community. And so we need everyone to sort of be a part of that. But what I also think about, and this was something that as I look at some of the people that I work with, they are young people and some teachers, I notice that for some of us, like our strand is weak. The quality of the strand that we hold has not been formed in the same strength, not universally. We have not had all the same resources. We have not had all the same ingredients. We have not had all of that. And I think that's the reason the cordage exists too, is because we braid together so that if at some point somewhere your cord snaps because it was weak, you're still held together as you braid through with everyone else, right? You have those moments where maybe your cord will snap, that your thread in that, but you are still part of the whole and you can continue to be braided in. And the mana'o that I have from voyaging is that we can splice, we can reinforce, we can braid together multiple cords to become one different and stronger one. I also think about how this relates to that idea of hana. My teacher, Tom Penna, from whom Uncle Pono, and he is a student also of John Kanimikawa, talks about how you can conceive of the universe actually as an aha. The entire tapestry of existence is a cordage that has been weaving since the beginning of time. It's been braiding. And the only, in his perspective and in the mana'o that he's received, like the existence of the universe, all it wants to do is connect through you to connect you with your divine purpose for it being. Like there's a reason you exist, and it is to be a specific part of that cordage that has been braiding since the beginning of time. It means we all have a place, right? I think, and those moments, I always say those moments when you're like, oh my gosh, I was totally meant to be here. You know, that spark where it's like, oh, I'm like the right fit for this right thing. And like, we got this, guys, like we're here, we're good. Like we got the thing that we need to make it happen. You feel that spark because that's the cord of the universe finding you. It has, all it wants to do is connect through you, connect through your existence and keep going past you so that it brings you in you fall in with such synchronicity into the whatever's happening in that moment. And I felt that a couple of times. I'm like, whoa, that was it. This is exactly where I was meant to be at this exact time. And thank you, universe, for reminding me that those moments exist. Right? I think part of the challenge that I see as I work with entrepreneurs and others is that we have such a scarcity mindset that when we see a cord flying around, we go grab it because we're not sure when our cord is ever coming. And so we're in this process of gathering up all of these lines, all of these cords that actually probably belong to somebody else's existence because we don't know if we're ever going to find ours. And so we take opportunities from other people and we hold on to them, even ones we don't really want, right? Because we're like, oh, what if mine never comes? Well, maybe I don't have faith. I don't have that aloha for myself, knowing that my divine inspiration will find. And so not only do we take what could be somebody else's place in the cordage, we also block ourselves from having ours, from letting it find us. And so it's just part of that thinking about like, am I holding on to things that are not really mine to hold on to? Because if I am, that means it's taking the place of like something that probably is mine that wants to come to me and wants to be found in my life. And so it's that, how do we weed out that which is not really ours and then leave space to grow the things that could be? Again, not practice it. I mean, it's like, yeah, flip over your bowl of light. Not easy, but I think works in progress. And so I bring that up as a personal practice one as well. And then I will share if I can find my screen again, which I cannot. So let me see what I'm doing here. Here we go. Oh, I did find it. What I wanted to do with this a couple minutes was I wanted to share some of the practices that we like, ways to explore, right? This session was about ways to explore our daily practice and how we might conceptualize how these values might show up in our daily lives as sort of productive practices. And so I'm gonna share with you, there's 2 more videos. And the reason why I share the videos is because they're just so much more eloquent than I am. And I think really, really kind of shares the meaning and intention behind what we are trying to do. And so here we have an Aho Nui practice. So in Aho Nui, we translate that to the big breath, right? Aho Nui. And it's often said to mean patience. When you are Aho Nui, usually it means that you're being patient and you're waiting. But Aunty Pilahi and Uncle Pono say that this is actually a verb. We are waiting for the moment. We're not just waiting. You're not just waiting for, I don't know what. Not just like sitting around, kind of like sleeping maybe. This is not Aho Nui, right? It is waiting for the moment. But so it means you're processing and engaging and really being active in your listening and in your observations. And it means turning to your inner universe, noticing the moments that are causing or inspiring reaction, but then pausing to get past the reaction and go into the energy of action. And so what I think we often deal with is discomfort, right? And the minute we feel discomfort, we feel like we got to change something because this is so uncomfortable for us. Like, how do we even deal with this? And so with Aho Nui and the idea of like, how do we give ourselves space to grow and to feel that discomfort? I wanted to share just this short and kind of maybe not, I hope not silly, but I really appreciate the manao in this video about what it means to be patient through discomfort.
A lobster is a soft, mushy animal that lives inside of a rigid shell. That rigid shell does not expand. Well, how can the lobster grow? Well, as the lobster grows, that shell becomes very confining. The lobster feels itself under pressure and uncomfortable. It goes under a rock formation to protect itself from predatory fish, casts off the shell, and produces a new one. Well, eventually, that shell becomes very uncomfortable as it grows, right? Back under the rocks, good. And the lobster repeats this numerous times. The stimulus for the lobster to be able to grow is that it feels uncomfortable. Now, if lobsters had doctors, they would never grow, because as soon as the lobster feels uncomfortable, goes to the doctor, gets a Valium, gets a Percocet, feels fine, never gets off its shell. So I think that we have to realize that times of stress are also times that are signals for growth. And if we use adversity properly, we can grow through adversity.
I share that one because I think it's important, one, to recognize that many times we say like, oh, we want to fix somebody's problem, right? People come to us, they're like, oh, I don't know how to solve this. And or even ourselves, we go to ask somebody advice and we don't sit with the discomfort. Some of us, we go straight to like finding a solution. And a lot of times we're finding a solution to the symptom, not the cause, because we're just solving for like what's on the surface. Why are you uncomfortable? It's like giving that Valium or that Percocet, right? Rather than being like, what's the deeper thing that we might need to cast off in order for us to get through this? The other thing that's missing from that video, as we did a little bit more research, because it didn't sit well with me at first when I watched it. I mean, it was fun, but I was like, there's something missing. And it's because there's this like rugged individualism of the West that says like, you can do this all on your own. You just go crawl under a rock and you take off your shell and then you grow a new one and you did it all by yourself. Congratulations, right? But in what we researched, there's actually what happens is when the lobster is in that moment of growth, there are other lobsters watching from around that rock formation to help to deter predators. So we don't do this on our own. We do this as a watchful community, right? We do this in partnership and in collaboration. And in that case, unspoken, right? There's an unspoken, like, hey, I need help. I'm not going to even ask for it. I'm going under this rock. And they're like, oh, somebody going under the rock. We better go do the thing. And I think about that in our practice. How often do we see somebody who's at that moment trying to get under that rock, right? How often do we see somebody that maybe doesn't even know that they need to ask for someone to get their back, to watch them as they do something different? And so I think about Aho Nui as that waiting for the moment, like the watchful gaze, paying attention to like, who might need that? And how might I be that person? Or how might I help them recognize that that's what they might need? But even, and then I think about turning it back on yourself. How often have you needed that and not reached out for help to ask for someone, right? Said, I'm going to do this on my own. I got to deal with this on my own. When in actuality, there is no dealing with it on your own, because everything that you do affects all these people around you. And so I think about that as just like, how do we communicate? The real need is that I need to go through this part of the process kind of by myself, grow my own new shell. Nobody else can grow my shell for me, but I do need people to maybe help deter some predators when I'm in my tenderest moments. Right. And so I think about that too, as like, how do we ask? How do we get beyond the fear of asking and ask for that help? And so that's sort of thinking about the personal practice there. And then I think maybe I was gonna share Olu Olu, but maybe because we don't have that much time left, I'll just go ahead and see if anybody, so that was just one practice. We have others for each of the values that we sort of explored together. Oh, sorry, I'm like playing a video now. You can hear it. It's not voyaging videos. It's not like oh, right. Sorry about that. I am a technical mess. But here we go. We're gonna open for questions, comments, feedback, pushback on any of that. I know we only got through one of the practices kind of in an unpacked way. The next one was Olu Olu, as you know, which is difficult and hard. And I was gonna talk about sailing. That is to me the most Olu Olu. That is the time when you need most aloha, but Olu Olu practice in canoe building and canoe sailing. Yeah, but I will take questions. Um, anyone that has anything they want to share, something that was brought up in the video, in the talk, in anything, comment.
Um,
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ilani Kiaha. I currently live on Molokai. I'm from Maui. Um, the video you just showed us with the lobster, something that came to my mind is I like what the guy was saying about a lot of times we experience growth when we're feeling uncomfortable. And like one of my favorite sayings is um, there's no comfort in the growth zone and no growth in the comfort zone. I think it's an anonymous person who made that quote. I don't know who, but I've kind of always learned from that. But I also was thinking about I think her name is Dr. Brown. I forgot her first name, but she did like a TED talk on vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. And I was just thinking about when we feel uncomfortable, and then in the lobster's instance, you know, he's taking off the old shell to grow a new shell. That's a state of vulnerability, and there's power in that, even though there's some also you're vulnerable, right? But as we expose our vulnerabilities, it kind of feels like we open up, you know, this new opportunity to grow and to learn about ourselves or the situation we're in. And I think a lot of people and children that we service, we get them usually at their vulnerable states. And so we're growing as we support them, but they're in a state of growth. And so I think that helps our mindset to look and support in a way that fosters their growth during their time of vulnerability. But that is something that came to my mind as you played the lobster video.
Thank you, Ui. That's so beautiful. You know, I love that reminds me of like in education, we study this framework from Lev Vygotsky, and it's called the zone of proximal development. And basically what it is there's like comfort zone, growth zone. And what people don't talk about is the panic zone, right? Which is like you go from your comfort zone, which you're saying, right? If you're in comfort, there's no growth. You get to the growth zone, it's uncomfortable. But then there's one more ring, which is the like, you push me so far outside my comfort zone that I am now in panic. I'm going to shut all the way back down to like, I call it turtle mode. Like, no, I'm not doing it. And so what I've learned from my own practice, and maybe this is something that you guys have seen too, is that what is in my comfort zone is in somebody else's growth zone. And I often don't know that we're in different zones. And so I might be pushing them to do something or to say something, or even just in the presence and the words I'm using, I'm already in their so far uncomfortable zone and I am still in my comfort zone. So I don't see it. I don't see them start to hit the panic zone. And then I'm wondering like, oh, why did they shut down? And that's my empathy, right? Like I really need to build that empathy practice. I was just thinking about that, about how like sometimes what we feel so comfortable with is so uncomfortable for others and vice versa. We could both be in the same conversation and somebody is in extreme discomfort and somebody is in extreme comfort. And that's, I think the aloha response is to try to find that balance in that. So thank you for bringing that up.
You think that building in that comfort zone is part of trusting, when you have that trust among each other and knowing that that's the person that you build a relationship, that's how the trust has developed, and you be able to kind of like climb out your shell, and and all of that. Just wanted to share.
Yeah, of course. And also being able to communicate, right? Hey, you've pushed me way to the brink of my comfort zone. I mean, I'm in my uncomfortable zone right now. So maybe we got to slow down, right? Like, how often do people say that? Or do they just go to being shut down? Or how much do we stay in our comfort zone and then ask people to come to us in our zone? Right. And which puts that, right. And just like, I think all of those sort of, what is the reciprocity in the relationship and communication there? And also knowing that some people, that discomfort or that comfort zone is a response to their trauma and their lived experiences. And so they want to stay in a place where they know stability. And some of us that have had the privilege of living a different life or experiencing it in a different way, like we thrive in the discomfort of the growth zone. Maybe because we haven't felt unprotected and we haven't felt exposed and we haven't felt degenerated or extracted from, right? Like there's all kinds of, again, I think about the kids from the privileged communities and adults from the privileged communities that I work with. I cannot fault them for the fact that they don't understand what other people are going through, right? That's not their lived experience. I can ask them though to try to develop empathy in that and to see how they have contributed in their lives to the degeneration of other people's existence. Yeah. Again, my own aloha practice, patience.
I'm going off of what Auntie Tammy was sharing, that trust, and then you shared about communication. I think that's also another, what's your, comfort level too on those things. Yeah. Cause like trust for some people is easily given or received, but some, like you said, past trauma or other things they might have barriers to building trust with others, even if you have the best intentions and you came with your aloha and you came with all these things. They don't know those feelings, and so they might think, oh, they're being nice to me because they want something. And so at least a lot of people that I've got the privilege of working with have those things. So even if you come with the most genuine aloha, if they're not ready for it, it's hard. And then if they don't know how to communicate that to you, it's hard. So communication is important, but if they're not ready for it, I think also we as providers or supports or whatever you want to call it, have to also like read that, like know that we're making them feel uncomfortable or no. And that is hard. I feel like that is a hard practice, because I definitely do not have that yet. And I feel like I've been learning it a lot through the work that I've been doing. Because like some people also show that they're happy, even though inside they're not. And so you're thinking that you're making progress and steps towards healing and improvement, but they might be within themselves not expressive of the pain or the hurt that's being caused by just discussing something, or by looking at it from a different mindset. Like, depends on whatever you're doing. But I just wanted to share that I really like those comments, that communication is important, and then realizing where people's comfort level is in that, and then trying to do it. But definitely not an easy task, because I don't know, I never figure them out yet, but I'm trying. And I think that's our, like what you said, your aloha that you bring. You're trying to find that empathy, to understand where they're coming from, even when they can't communicate it to you. Because for me, I'm like, well, if you tell me, then I can work on that. But if you don't tell me, how am I going to work on it? But if they can't, because they haven't learned that skill, or they're not comfortable sharing, or they haven't built that trust, or whatever the barriers and circumstances are, it is hard to get there.
I agree. Thank you
I
for
think some of this comes out, at least in our kind of westernized allopathic model in mental health, from how we talk about things. And we say like disorders, just that word, right? It can generate shame. Like in family medicine, we don't say you have hypertensive disorder and you have diabetes disorder, because you're weak and you don't know how to take care of yourself. We just say you have hypertension, you have diabetes, and here's how we're going to manage it. And so I've always sort of been, even though I've stewed and been, raised in medicine in this part of my career, uncomfortable with that idea of disorder, because people just, they have struggles at times, and there are ways to heal and ways to manage it. And it doesn't mean anything bad about us as people when these things happen to us. And it really is all of us. I don't know anybody during COVID who wasn't touched by something, including myself. So like, we're kind of, like you said earlier, we're all in this together. And I think we have to stop talking and thinking about ourselves as being bags of disorder.
Yeah. I think, so as we close, I know this session is coming to, I think, Brittany, is that correct? I'm just checking time. Anakala often, like one of the mana'a that he shared and really leaned into a lot is connection, not correction. Right. And so when you start from a place of calling something a disorder or a deficit, that's already a correction. Anything that has that dis in front of it. Right. And so for him, it was, how do we see the connection? And I think that's the empathy and the communication, not the correction. Consider this person whole and a teacher for you, and someone that holds medicine, that maybe what they needed was an opportunity to share it rather than to be filled with something else from someone else because they are deficient. And so I think about that too. Connection, not correction, is really a big teaching for me from him. All of it, right? Our school system, prisons, everything's punitive. It's all meant to correct, to adhere, to conform. And so it treats people as if they came broken and needed to be fixed. Yeah. Well, thank you all for everything. So I'm going to sit and cry for like a couple minutes.
Vicky, can I say one thing before we exit? I thank you so much. Yeah, I just appreciate you and all that you're doing to carry forward all that you're doing. And Kumu Tom Pena, I just was emailing him that I was in your class. I was on with his hui with Kupono last night, and I'm learning so much from him as well. He said to give you a big hug. He didn't realize so I'm giving you a Zumalani hug. Thank you very much. I look forward to meeting you and giving you a real hug one day.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you guys get to hang out with Crazy Tom. Nah, he's awesome. I once
He
told him,
was like, he blew
oh
my
yeah,
mind last night. He put us
oh
in
man.
the fourth dimension of, I was like, oh my, okay.
I once told him, I said, you know, being with you is like drinking from the fire hydrant of the universe. And it's sometimes a little much, but I think I figured out how to just take a little bit at a time.
Yeah, it was a block sphere of XYZ last night. I was like, what?
I'll show you my drawing. I'll bring it over to you, Kupono. Thank you,
Oh.
Mickey.
Well, thank you, everyone. And again, I'm going to put my email address again in this chat. Please let me know if you want the slide deck. I'll send it to you. If you want to hang out, talk story, email me. I'll make time. If I don't get back to you right away, it's because I'll be on Kaho'olawe for the next 4 days and then in Alaska with our Tlingit friends for another 4 days. And then I'm back. So, but I will have email in between. I just don't know when exactly. So yeah. Thank you, everyone. I so appreciate the time. Thank you for coming and giving your energy to Uncle Pono's legacy and his teachings, and also for feeding me all that you have. I learned and grew. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.